This episode is brought to you by Choiceology, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Hosted by Katie Milkman, an award-winning behavioral scientist and author of the best-selling book, How to Change, Choiceology is a show about the psychology and economics behind our decisions. Hear true stories from Nobel laureates, authors, athletes, and everyday people about why we do the things we do. Listen to Choiceology at schwab.com/podcast or wherever you listen.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
Okay, babe. Friday night, 9:04 p.m. It's been a long week. I've got a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think about my relationship to anger?
I would say your relationship to anger is seasonal.
What does that mean?
Just like certain seasons are kind of like chapters of life. I think I enjoy it least when it's directed at me. Any surprises here?
No.
Okay.
Do you think there's a relationship between personal and political anger?
Oh, sure. I think we probably take like political frustration, anger, and we project it onto people we love.
This is How To. I'm Courtney Martin. I think it's safe to say this year has been my toughest ever. My dad has been living with dementia for a while now, but its impact on him has reached acute and cruel new depths. My husband, John, who you just heard, and I uprooted our family from a community we loved in order to move in with my parents and take care of my dad. And this totally destabilizing chapter in my life has been unfolding amidst this extremely stressful political climate. I've always prided myself on being hardy in moments like this, but this season has forced me to confront my own limits. Truth be told, I'm a little bit broken. And though Leonard Cohen says it's light that gets through the cracks, in my case, it's been something else. Anger. I have found myself, and really this is like for the first time in my life, viscerally angry on a regular basis. Like seeing red angry, storming out of the house angry, sometimes raising my voice angry. And to be fair, this might come as a surprise even to those around me. I'm pretty good at taking my angry self elsewhere, which my youngest Stella can attest to.
You go outside and breathe, or you read, or you just kind of go to your room and just kind of calm down. I don't know what you're doing there.
I do love a good breathing exercise, but it often doesn't feel like enough these days. This anger has been coming more frequently and more forcefully, and to be honest, I'm a little embarrassed. I thought I was unflappable. I prided myself on having the longest fuse. But I also don't want to be ashamed of something that I know is a normal human emotion. So I reached out to a very wise woman to give me some advice. Soraya Chemaly is a journalist, activist, and an award-winning author. Her latest is The Resilience Myth, and she debuted in 2018 with a book that's extremely applicable for this conversation. It's called Rage Becomes Her: The Power of Women's Anger. When you wrote this book back in 2017, 2018, I mean, there was a lot to be angry about, but Lord, we have just more and more material, right? Don't we?
Yes, I was just saying earlier today that every day is more dissonant than the prior day.
Yeah.
It's just happening with such rapidity, and it's very hard to regulate emotions in that environment. Yours, other people's,
You're already making me feel a little bit better about reaching out because this episode is going to get pretty personal.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you if you could just lay out a very basic definition of like, what is anger and what is the difference between anger and rage, which I think are often mistaken for each other.
Anger is one of the essential emotions that we as human beings have. I think of anger primarily as the emotion of injustice, the emotion of relationality, in fact, because when we feel anger, it is because something is wrong. There is a problem. And most of the time, when there is a problem, when there is an injustice, either towards us or to the people we care for, we have to turn to others to resolve the problem. So it is the signal emotion. It says, wait, what is happening? We have to pause, understand it, and then fix it. And that's different from rage, because rage, I think, is really a dysfunctional manifestation of all of what I just said. It is when anger doesn't have uptake. It is when your relationships do not bear the sort of reciprocity, whether they're personal or public, that you think they demand, right? And so the rage is a maladaptation. By the time people feel rage, it's probably a fairly long simmering anger that they have experienced. And it's destructive. And that ties to the third thing, which is resentment. A lot of people conflate resentment with anger. The interesting difference is that anger is a very forward-looking emotion. It is, how can we make the future better? What has to change to eliminate my anger?
Yeah.
Resentment really looks back. Resentment isn't calibrated towards improving things. It's just about retribution for loss. It's a sort of vindictive anger.
Yes. Can you say a little bit about why we are socialized to suppress anger? And I understand this is a complex question because I'm a white woman asking this question. Like, I am socialized as a woman to suppress my anger. My anger in some ways, because I'm white, is more acceptable than it would be for a woman of color asking that question. So
that's right.
Up front, we're acknowledging there are like so many layers to how we are socialized around anger and who's allowed to express it and in what ways. But from a gendered perspective, I guess especially, can you talk a little bit about the ways that we're socialized?
One of the reasons I wrote the book was because in the 2016 election, anger was so prevalent. And it wasn't just national. You could see anger in growing macho fascist movements around the world. And both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump could leverage populist anger. They could look angry. They could use angry words. They could have an angry affect. And no one really thought they're, quote unquote, crazy men. They are irrational people. Whereas Hillary Clinton and other women in the political sphere couldn't do that. They had to stay very calm and unruffled, and they couldn't tap into the anger the same way. And I think that was pretty stark. And so the voter side of that was that certain types of voter anger is recognized. It is recognized primarily as a virtue of citizenship in white men historically in the United States. When white men get angry, it must be serious, right? It must be a political issue. That's not the same for black men, right?
Right.
An angry black man is criminalized almost entirely. We had a running gag about President Barack Obama in The Anger Translator, right? He couldn't do what white male presidents had done before him. He had to stay very calm and have no emotional register in response to his own outrage. For women, as you say, super complicated, right? Black women roll out of bed and they're considered angry. Right. They don't have to do anything but wake up. And if you're Hispanic or you're kind of ethnically ambiguous like I am, you're more likely in anger to be dismissed as hot, spicy, some consumable, just like a kind of dismissive sexualization. If you're Asian, you're more sad, passive, you're expected to have a sad affect. But if you're a white woman, the most common way of people shutting down your anger and to dismiss your anger is to literally, a form of ableism, call you crazy, right? It's the big mouth, the loud voice, the she was unhinged. And of course, white women leverage that, the stereotype of Karens, in a hierarchy, just like men leverage anger against women. They leverage it against people of color, black people, because they have the ability to do that.
I'm realizing that part of my socialization has been that anger is acceptable on behalf of other people, and particularly
That's
on behalf
right.
of my children. Like
Yes,
the mama
the
bear
mom.
anger is totally acceptable.
Yes.
But anger on behalf of my own needs or desires is like, that falls into this category of like, really, come on, like that's hysterical, or like
You're
is
selfish.
Like,
you're a bad person.
Yeah, this is like rich girl problems if you're upset about this thing.
So from early childhood, most girls and women, but I would say particularly white women and girls in the United States, are socialized to be other-focused, to be self-abnegating, to not be rude, aggressive, disruptive, demanding, all of these things. So by the time kids are, 3 years old, they already associate an angry face with masculinity. They already associate, for girls, by the time they're 8 or 9, anger as something that will bring scolding and punishment, right? Because in fact, they're supposed to maintain relationships and learn that their own anger will break those relationships. And it becomes truly self-abnegating. Most men respond, there's some really fascinating studies about this, but most men find anger in their wives selfish, aggressive, and unpleasant. They don't respond to it as an articulation of need or a desire for help, and they want to shut it down. So they start tone policing the expression instead of listening to the words or the need or the emotion. And that's pretty consistent. And so the same man who feels uncomfortable with a woman's anger at home and then polices it in women at work gains from his anger, because everybody associates his anger with masculinity and leadership, which is how we get to these presidential races where men can use anger. It's a super powerful emotion. It's a super resonant emotion, but people associate it with authority. But when women show it, it undermines their ideas of gender, and then they don't trust her.
Right.
And that's super, not just unfair, it is debilitating.
Coming up after the break, we're going to focus on identifying and addressing personal anger. I even ask Soraya if rage rooms are as useful and fun as they seem. And then we will get into harnessing the anger for change. Stay with us.
This episode is brought to you by Choiceology, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Choiceology is a show all about the psychology and economics behind our decisions. Each episode shares the latest research in behavioral science and dives into themes like, can we learn to make smarter decisions, and the power of do-overs. The show is hosted by Katie Milkman. She's an award-winning behavioral scientist, professor at the Wharton School, and author of the best-selling book, How to Change. In each episode, Katie talks to authors, historians, athletes, Nobel laureates, and everyday people about why we make irrational choices and how we can make better ones to avoid costly mistakes. Listen and subscribe at schwab.com/podcast or find it wherever you listen.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Sometimes anger can be just a big cloud, but it can rain sometimes, or it can be thunder. If you really
When I started noticing my anger this year, I began looking for a way to describe it. My daughter Stella, who's 9 years old, told me her anger is a cloud, one that sometimes just rains and sometimes storms with a lot of thunder.
and thunder while you're screaming and yelling.
While I adore Stelli's metaphor, my friend Allison told me something that felt a little more like what I'm experiencing. It's like I'm a baby wizard full of potential power, but I don't really know how to wield it. So I risk burning the whole castle down.
You can only absorb so much, even if you're a resilient person. We have real material limits. It all feels okay until it doesn't feel okay. I think that A, naming your anger, super important. B, making meaning of it. What is it telling me? What is wrong? Why do I feel this way? And I think for me as a writer, and also having studied a lot of therapeutic approaches, writing helps people because it involves a different type of cognition and a mode of problem solving. And so making meaning is very important. And then I think the way I put it is to think in terms of emotional competence. Okay, I have this massive feeling. It's threatening to destabilize me and my family or to consume me. How can I use all that energy in a useful way? And I will say that going into rage rooms or screaming in fields the way women did during COVID are not actually very effective ways to do that.
I was just going to ask you about that because it seems like an off-gassing.
Yeah. And it
which,
doesn't
I
direct
respect.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it doesn't honor the signal, right? Or does it? I don't know.
Well, I got a lot of calls during COVID from journalists who were writing about literally the women gathering in fields to scream. And while I certainly understand the instinct, the fact is that they then went home and swallowed it all.
Right.
Instead of saying, hey, I am doing all of the homeschooling, and you may feel like you're doing it, but the way we distribute our time is showing that that is not the case, and we need to balance these things, whatever the issue was. And so women are really skilled at expressing their anger in a way that keeps it out of relationships, which can be useful, but can also be super harmful because it's often the relationship that needs addressing.
Wow. That's so connected to your book on resilience, where we're
is.
Celebrating the screaming in the park, but we're not saying how are we dealing with the structural, cultural underpinnings of the need to go scream in the park.
Right. And then the screaming in the park isn't changing anything, And in fact, the screaming in the park, like rage rooms, can cause you to ruminate, which is not helpful either. And then that becomes the resentment. It becomes the sadness. It becomes the tiring frustration. And what you want to be able to do is say, no, I have every reason to feel this way. What is it exactly that would have to change in order for me not to feel this way? Because the point of anger is not to feel anger anymore.
It feels like there's not enough room in women's bodies right now for all the anger that we justifiably have. Do you think that's happening on sort of a national level?
Absolutely. And I have a book coming up, and the reason I mention is because I put a whole chapter in about backlash as an embodied experience. We talk about backlash, right, in the news. We talk about cycles of backlash and political backlash, but very rarely when you hear media discourse, is anyone pausing to say, what does that mean to you in your body? What is happening when we have to live through such profound anti-feminism, anti-pluralism, anti-democracy, rising white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia? What does it mean when we feel not just for ourselves, but for the people we love, for the people in our communities, even for people we don't know, and we feel anger, we feel sadness, or we feel fear, but we also feel anger. And the anger doesn't have a place to go right now because of backlash, because of what we're living through. And so I think that gets you to the next stage beyond the naming, the labeling, the making meaning, which is, okay, how can people who maybe are uncomfortable saying I'm angry, instead, and I know that's a lot of people, how can you say, how can I stay healthy and retain a sense of peace?
Yeah.
So the anger that you feel, there are lots of ways to address it. You can say, what am I capable of doing? I'm not entirely helpless. I don't have to do everything all the time. I don't have to do everything at scale. I cannot solve these problems, but I can support my community. I can meet with people. I can help people. I do think being other focused is a good way to do that.
Yeah.
Because the anger can be so consuming, but also just creativity.
And for me, unfortunately, being other focused is like my drug.
Yes.
I'm a helper. So it's like when you say that, I'm like,
me too.
Yes, let me just focus on everybody else. And part of what this year has been, which is very healthy for me again, is slamming into like, I have to take care of myself.
That's why I said, if you think in terms of health, you're like, I am now not well. I'm tired all the time, or I'm sad all the time, or I have no energy, no physical energy. And that's when I think, particularly for women, the levels of stress and exhaustion for 10 years now have just been off the charts and much higher than men's, right? And in fact, Gallup does these annual surveys globally where they look at emotions, and they have found that women's anger levels have just steadily climbed over the last 10, 12 years, and men's have gone down. And so I was looking at this study with a BBC reporter who called to ask me some questions, and she said, it's interesting though. I said, well, what does it look like in the US? She goes, it's not as acute in the US. And I said, yeah, but did you look at sadness? Because in the United States, women tend to feel a lot of shame, so they won't call it anger, they'll call it sadness. And she looked at it and she goes, well, that's off the charts.
Fascinating.
There are cultures in which women do not feel shame about their anger. We just don't live in one.
Just makes me think so much about all the conversation around men and the loneliness epidemic. And I'm like, should we be talking about women and a sadness, like an anger epidemic, or should we be naming this in some collective way so that women don't feel so crazy when they're experiencing it in their personal lives?
NPR actually did a great piece titled, Is the Loneliness Epidemic Real? And there's no doubt that people feel isolated and lonely. But if you look at elderly women, if you look at postpartum women, if you look at 25-year-old women, they're all experiencing very high rates of loneliness. And in fact, I would argue that there's a pretty good case to be made that the way a man typically interprets the word lonely might be different from the way a woman typically thinks of the word lonely. The studies don't really parse that, they don't go into what it means to people. And so I also think that what's happening to men who feel lonely might be the effects of being decentered by society, by women. And that feels like loneliness and abandonment, because in fact, it is a crisis of recognition as much as it is an emotion.
Which is so interesting, because based on what we've just been talking about, women's anger is sometimes a push towards centering themselves.
Absolutely.
So
right.
when I'm saying to my husband, I need things to feel different in this house, I'm saying I need this.
And that is perceived as selfish, and it is perceived as cruel to the people around you. It is perceived as, just not you personally, but in these studies, that's why I said a lot of men in heterosexual relationships, they don't really understand women's anger because it confounds their ideas of what a wife, a spouse, a romantic interest, a mother should be, which is totally other focused. And when you think about that at work, we know, for example, that when women ask for promotions and they say, I've done this, I've accomplished this, I've met these metrics, they're far less likely to get a raise and a promotion than if they say, I really need more money to take care of my family. When they step back in their own negotiations and they foreground other people, they're much more likely to be rewarded, and they're much more likely to be punished if they don't do that. And that's what anger is like.
So it's like operating at every single level. I'm now thinking when I feel anger, I could say to myself, oh, your body is trying to balance out the whole damn universe. You're trying
there you go. It's not, that's
in
right.
This way that's like I'm centering myself, but in a way that feels congruent with like this broader, bigger thing that's happening. I guess that's why I'm saying like I like the idea of naming this, because it does feel isolating to be an individual angry woman in your house. Like, why am I so infuriated? I mean, I know why I'm infuriated, but
I think what's also hard for people, but maybe more for many men, is how other focused the anger is. How you can feel anger on behalf of other people that you don't know. Yeah. And somehow that is mystifying. Like if you have that high social justice kind of personality or just your way of operating, a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, what do you care? And in fact, it means if you have a wide moral circle, you are more likely to feel angry.
Okay, so we learned that anger is a signal that something is wrong and it needs addressing. We've also learned that women are socialized from a young age to suppress our anger, and that suppression leads to needs going unmet and inequity in the home, at work, and in the public sphere. Let's take another quick break, and when we come back, Soraya and I talk about anger that gets directed, maybe sometimes misdirected, at a partner.
Everyone's been talking about AI lately, but let's face it, just talking about tech trends doesn't help you be more efficient at work. For that, you need the right tools. You need Zapier. I use Zapier to help people sign up for my newsletter, The Science of Better. I went to Zapier and just told it what I wanted to happen, and it made it happen. With Zapier's AI orchestration platform, you can bring AI to any workflow and connect top AI models to tools your team already uses. Add AI exactly where you need it. Whether it's an autonomous agent, a customer chatbot, or something else, you can orchestrate it with Zapier. Break the hype cycle and put AI to work across your company, for real, with Zapier. Join the millions of businesses transforming how they work with Zapier and AI. Get started for free by visiting zapier.com/how-to. That's zapier.com/how-to.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
If you're looking for a way to stay informed without a fire hose of information, check out What Next, Slate's daily news podcast. Host Mary Harris and her team have a beautiful way of distilling the most important story of the day and finding the people behind the headlines. You can listen to Slate's What Next wherever you get your podcasts. More now with Soraya Chemaly, journalist and author of Rage Becomes Her. She has a new book coming out this November called All We Want Is Everything: How We Dismantle Male Supremacy. One thing I have noticed about my own surge of anger is that it often gets directed at my husband. I think there are a range of reasons for this. First and foremost, sometimes he pisses me off. The dude buys lemons at the grocery store, even though we have a lemon tree in our yard. Are you kidding me? Look, it's normal to get angry at our partners in long-term relationships. If we weren't infuriating one another at times, we'd be doing some next-level repression. But another reason my anger gets directed at him, or maybe gets disproportional sometimes, is because he's in close range, and I know he can handle it. Let's say your husband asks you, what's the schedule again tomorrow? And you've gone to great lengths to create elaborate ways of sharing information so that he can just see the schedule
doesn't
for
have
himself.
to do that.
And you lose your mind with him. You explode on him. A lot of friends said, like, I recognize that my husband is responsible in these, hetero contexts, like is responsible for something that is signaling some anger that I do want to say, But then because everything else is so heightened, it's like they are the safe person to like unload on. And that's also not what I want. Like, I need peace in my marriage and peace in my life. So I want to be someone who can proportionally express like, hey, we worked on the schedule. Like, can you just look at it, instead of like saying that, instead of like losing my mind because there are ICE raids and my boss is an asshole. And now I'm like screaming at my husband because he's the safe person to scream at. So talk to me about that. Like, what do we do about
I think
that?
that's a lot. There's a couple of things, right? First of all, not great to be screaming at your spouse, but also better than punching down at your kids.
Right.
Which a lot of people do, right? A lot of men will come home from work. They'll punch down at their wives. Really, like some technically actually punching them. Too many. But also a lot of people can't express themselves safely at work or in public. So it gets all pent up, and that really takes a toll on families. And so I do think that contending with the desire in our society for control and having to accept feelings of helplessness is a big thing, right? A lot of the anger that I think we experience and that I see in other people comes from helplessness. And it is either a new sensation for people or just a difficult sensation, because in fact, to go back to resilience, it feels like you're not being strong, you know? And so it's easier to express anger because it is a type of control than it is to express sadness or fear or anxiety or exhaustion or all of these other feelings that we associate not just with weakness, but with femininity and feminine qualities and affect. And I think it's important to be able to say, if I feel these ways, how can I resolve my frustration and my helplessness without this explosive anger? Because there are alternatives. You just kind of have to grapple with how unpleasant they might be. I do think there's something else, though, that's interesting, which is I think the big problem for women who struggle with anger, and I was a woman who struggled with, I don't think I ever said the words "I'm angry" until I was maybe 44.
Wow.
It just was not, I was definitely angry.
I'm right on time because I'm 45. So
yeah.
This is perfect.
It's perfect, right? But I do think that the risk that women especially experience in expressing their anger is that they will have to come to terms with the degree to which the people around them care or really don't care what they want, what they need, what they're saying. And for some people, that produces enough information that there are serious consequences, right? Like if a woman in a heterosexual marriage hits a wall because she does not have reciprocal love, reciprocal care, the person she's with will not listen, will not change, then she has a decision to make. And then she has to decide, how vulnerable am I in this situation? What am I capable of doing? Have I just given up 10, 15 years of my professional life? I mean, lots of women grapple with that. And that's a hard thing to learn because you've been taking care of people. Maybe you've thought, I will be taken care of. And gradually over time, that's not what's happening. And I think that's why you're seeing double the rates of gray divorce, declines in overall heterosexuality in Gen Z. Like those two bookends are, I think, quite telling because the women in the middle are kind of stuck if they're having those experiences.
Take us through, so midlife lady, discovering her anger for the first time. Maybe she's a white woman based on some of the stuff we're talking about, but maybe not. Are there practical ideas? You mentioned journaling. Like, do you think there are certain practices that women in midlife who are discovering this and feel like baby wizards can do to keep track of what's happening in their bodies and figure out how to express it and get what they want and need? Even if it might be staying with a partner, it might be leaving a partner, whatever it is, just like, how do we help people develop a very practical relationship with their anger in moments like this?
Well, I think this sounds really basic, but I do think that a lot of people can't name their anger for anger. And
Yes.
we are definitely socialized to minimize our own anger. We use minimizing words. We dismiss it. You know, we say, oh, I'm just irritated. I'm frustrated. I'm really stressed. But you peel back just a couple of layers off of those words. And when you say, well, what's stressing you out? Why are you frustrated? And you get to the nub of the problem, it is often just rage, right? Because things have just been pent up, building up. There's no responsiveness to needs. I mean, this is the thing. This is why I think it's the most kind of collective emotion. People think of love, which is true, but anger really usually requires someone else or a collective of people to do something. Very rarely is your anger at yourself sustained over decades, for example, you know, and very rarely can you by yourself change the things about the world that are making you so angry. And so you have to identify which relationships are important, which ones are reciprocal, which ones will sustain you, and which ones will not. That's really important. But that's why I always go back to, first of all, just name it. And then secondly, become educated in how closely tied your emotional well-being and your physical health are. You know, we are mind bodies, we're emotion mind bodies. We cannot tease out one thing from the other. And I think we are increasingly coming to appreciate what that means with a kind of Western scientific research orientation. But there's a lot of information that already exists about the effects, the very powerful effects and poor health effects of not having emotional regulation and competence. And so even with little children, I think what you're trying to do is model emotional competence. The children can see that maybe you have anger, but you're not allowing it to become a destructive force, either to you or to them or to your relationships.
Yeah.
And that's because it's conscious. You have to be conscious, I think, about it.
We just said so many important things I just want to underscore. One is if you're saying frustrated, irritated, peeved, whatever a
Over
lot,
and over, yeah.
take a minute to ask yourself, am I actually angry? And try to use that word and see how it feels. I feel like would be an interesting experiment, right?
Yes, and also write things down, even if you're not a writer. Because when you write it down or you make mental maps on paper, you actually put them on paper, it's so clarifying.
Yes, definitely. The other thing you made me think of when you mentioned it, the words that we choose, is I think I've often been both attracted to and also a little freaked out by women who own their anger. And I'm thinking like friendship wise, like I can think of particular women over the course of my life who I've been very close to, who I'm always like, whoa, like she's okay
really,
with expressing when she's mad and I don't want to piss her off. And and I'm just thinking what also that's such an interesting signal for listeners is like, if first of all, try to use the word anger yourself. Second of all, notice in your female relationships, like, how do you respond to other women's anger?
Yeah.
And not just like big political or celebrity anger. I'm talking about like your friends, like
your intimate circles or friends.
Because I think a lot of times women who very healthily own their anger end up freaking other women out.
100% don't have a knee-jerk judgment of other women. Like, we all internalize these biases. We all feel the threat that maybe another woman's anger poses. You know, because in fact, growing up, we can see how angry women are treated. Every single girl sees how angry women are treated, and it's not good.
And to your point about the destabilizing possibilities of anger, if I accept how angry you are, friend, and start to think about how angry I am, my whole life could get cracked wide open, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it might freak some women out just because we sense how powerful it is. Yeah.
That's right. And I think too, like you and I have been in the feminist world for a long time. There is no feminist project, no feminist activism that I am aware of that did not start in women coming together because they were pissed off. You don't engage in feminist activism unless you are feeling that level of outrage, just anger. I just think that's true. And that doesn't mean it has to be expressed in a hostile, threatening way. That's the other thing we didn't talk about, which is the difference between assertiveness, anger, and aggression. Because in women, we don't make those distinctions usually, especially in girls. A girl who is very assertive is often seen as being aggressive and then angry, when maybe she's just confident, And so in schools all the time, a young Black girl, for example, who's rambunctious or loud or has disruptive humor, she's really held to a standard that a young white boy wouldn't be, because he's seen as not being able to control himself, or his rambunctiousness is like incipient leadership. She gets disciplined and he doesn't. And that's because her level of assertiveness makes people uncomfortable, because it violates not just gender norms, but racial norms.
Right. Totally. I think that's another piece, is like, if Soraya at your age, if Courtney at 45 can kind of peel back some of the layers and try to understand, like, what was my relationship with anger when I was a little girl?
Oh, for sure. What did I learn?
Depending on your racial socialization or your class socialization, your religious socialization, like, what got taken from you? And is there some like restorative power and practice to saying, I'm actually someone who anger moves through very quickly if I let myself feel it. So I'm going to learn how to like feel it now.
If I feel it, then I've gotten rid of half the problem.
Right.
Like if I can say, oh, I'm really angry, I better do X.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if you don't allow yourself to say that, you can't do X. Anger's like water. It will find a way to come out. And if you don't carve a path that is helpful to you, that is healthy for you, it will find another one that is neither of those things, And so to go back to your question about what people can do, I think as adults, we can really be far more accepting in ourselves of all of our emotions. We have these emotions for a reason. They all serve a purpose. And it's when we're pretty young that they get, shut down and they get distributed. Like for boys are not allowed to feel sadness by and large. The expression of sadness or anxiety or fear is really drummed out of boys. And we're paying the consequences now, right? Like you just have to look at the government to see what that looks like. But boys should have the right to feel those things, to express those things without shame. And so ungendering emotions in the home, where race usually doesn't play as big a part, like in the intimate life of families that are mostly homogenous still, racially homogenous, gender will dominate the way that works. But just teaching children how to be competent with themselves, how to say, oh, I feel sad. Oh, that's anxiety. Oh, I am feeling hopeful today. And just using the words for the feelings.
Yeah.
That goes a long way.
It goes such a long way. So I am leaving this conversation with some real understanding, action steps, sort of sense of like, I almost feel like, I guess it gets back to the loneliness. Like I feel like part of a moment and I can just see like all these women around me.
Yes.
All of us like learning how to use our anger as a signal, how to channel it into creative work, how to center ourselves in ways that are like healthy and restorative, and maybe even get back to some of like the pre-socialization little girl essence of how we ourselves
well, you
in
really
our body
find yourself
experienced anger. Yeah.
Like you can remember what it feels like when you start. You're like, oh, I remember that. I remember myself when I felt free to have it.
Yes.
So
my body is remembering.
Your body is remembering.
Which is a really beautiful thing, because these lives are finite, as we know, and as I've really experienced this year. So while I'm here, I want to remember. Thank you so much for doing this, Soraya.
Oh, of course. My pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you.
So I just woke up. It's like 6 a.m, and I woke up from this dream that I got into a car and this little boy was pummeling my youngest daughter, just like elbowing her in the head over and over again. And I stopped him, and then I was just like filled with rage. that I could still like feel in my body when I woke up from the dream. It was so strong. I'm lying here in the dark thinking about what I learned from the conversation with Soraya, and I think the biggest takeaways for me were that sense of saturation, that oversaturation, and that anger is this really important, I would say, sacred language, sacred signal that something needs to change, even if that's just that you need less saturation, you need spaces to breathe and think and feel so you can actually ask for what you want and need. I was thinking about the dream, like what does it mean? And I think in some sense it seems like I'm the little girl and I'm needing gentleness and needing slowness and needing that part of me to be protected. And that's where the anger is coming from, is like the world is so brutal and moves so fast and is so cruel. And, you know, we see that reflected in every headline. And so the anger is like a very sort of primordial sense that like the gentleness in the world has to be protected, including inside my own little self. Whew. How's that for a post-interview dream synthesis? All right. Signing off. Trying to get some more sleep here. Okay, guys, that's our show. It was a vulnerable one for me, not gonna lie, so I do hope it's useful to you, and do me a favor, holler at me if it resonated. I'd love to hear about your experiences with midlife anger. What's really pissing you off these days? Are you waking up from dreams angry? What are your strategies for listening to the sacred language of your anger instead of stuffing it down or unloading on those you love? Leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001, or you can email us, or send us a voice memo at howto@slate.com. Also, the rage train does not stop here. In today's Slate Plus episode, I talk with Soraya about male supremacy. And guess what? She actually offers some hope for how we can get out from under this oppression. This bonus episode is available for you to listen to right now. And if you're not a Slate Plus subscriber yet, you can subscribe from the How To show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Or visit slate.com/howtoplus to get access wherever you listen. How To is produced by Rosemary Belson with Sophie Summergrad. Joel Meyer is our supervising producer. Merritt Jacob is senior technical director and composed our theme music. Charles Duhigg created the show. Carvel Wallace is my co-host, and I'm Courtney Martin. Thanks for listening.